very close examination of the opportunities that may arise to improve their careers, continue developing professionally, and perhaps give them a pathway to becoming employees directly of the department. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Beam. It's been very interesting to have you here. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for that report. I think it was very useful. In fact, I think that you did a lot of the work that we may be repeating in this particular study. So thank you for doing that, and certainly I read it with great interest. I also want to welcome our friends here into the chamber with us. One of the questions I wanted to ask about, it came up this weekend. You know, this weekend was obviously a pretty challenging place around the world, but one of the things that was on the CBC News was that Canada is very quickly becoming irrelevant in sub-Saharan Africa. Totally irrelevant is, in fact, what the quote in the news was. You know, we had said that there would be an Africa strategy that has not come out, and that there was a note that our failure in terms of diplomacy, development, and trade in the region meant that we were ceding much of Africa to other countries like China and Russia. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on that from that diplomatic standpoint.
Sure. Well, I'm delighted that you would pick a quotation that was taken from a committee that I was chairing. So we have embarked in the Senate on an Africa study, and I know that work is going on within the department. I know that Mr. Oliphant is directly involved in that, but we thought it would be useful to look at that. So we're going to do a deep dive. We have just started, and as you know, with your own background, it has to be more than official development assistance. We have to look at countries that may have slipped back during the pandemic, and see how trade, investment, and other things can be increased. And at the same time, there's been an increase in activity by countries that don't necessarily follow the ODA rules that have been established for by everyone else. And of course, China and Russia are the examples. So sub-Saharan Africa, difficult part of the country. I know from my previous life in our bilateral discussions with France, there was always a lot to talk about. But when you get into things like putting troops on the ground and international peacekeeping force and the like, it can get very complicated.
Well, Canada's quite diminished in peacekeeping as well in the region, well, all around the world, but in Africa in particular.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can certainly make that argument. But the point is, if you look at the demographic trends in Africa, as you know, it's going to be exponential in terms of population, in terms of need, and that there is a real role for Canada there. And I would add too that we are in a unique position in terms of two smaller organizations, the OIF, the Francophonie, and the Commonwealth, where we are the second largest contributors, at least in terms of our dues, not necessarily in terms of voluntary contributions. But that kind of puts us into a special position that could be utilized as well, in my opinion.
Well, and from my perspective, too, I mean, I know I have a different opinion than many people within global affairs, but I did not believe that it was particularly good for our diplomatic and our development portions of our foreign affairs to have global affairs all be in one place, because I do feel that trade has trumped the ability of our diplomacy and our development to take that meaningful place within our foreign policy. It's been something that I've seen for a long time that worries me about that. I know you've spoken that there are some real benefits to having it in one place, and I'm sure there are, but there is obviously things that are lost if we don't recognize the value of diplomacy and development as well as our trade relationships. And Senator Beam, I hope you'll forgive me. I'm gonna move a motion now because this is what we have to do when we want to move things. So thank you for being here. I am going to move the motion, and that will probably take the rest of my time. But I read your report with a lot of interest, and I do thank you for coming before the committee. So, Mr. Chair, I will be moving the motion that I distributed to the committee on February 5th on military goods and technology exports to Israel, and I will be asking for a recorded vote on that if I could. Now, the motion that pursuant to Standing Order 1081A and given the value of military goods and technology exports to Israel from Canada have exceeded $21 million in 2022, and that there were 315 utilized export permits and a further 199 authorized for military goods and technology to Israel reported in the 2022 report on the export of military goods, the committee order Global Affairs Canada to produce all documents, briefing notes, memorandums, and emails within the department, including the Minister of Foreign Affairs office, and between the department and the Department of National Defence, the Canadian Commercial Corporation, the Privy Council Office, and the Prime Minister's Office related to the granting of any export or brokering permits for military goods and technology to Israel between 2020 and 2024 within 30 days of the adoption of this motion, and that these documents be provided to the committee without redactions except to protect cabinet confidences. So obviously this is something I'd like us to vote on right now, and I'm happy to speak to it, but basically to say that this committee had a similar request a few years ago regarding Canadian military exports to Turkey that resulted in important information that was made public, and a study by this committee that led Canada to suspend military exports to Turkey, an action that we of course have seen reversed this month. I have another motion on arms exports to India that I will be moving at another time. I have been asking for clear answers on military exports to Israel for a long time. I have not been able to get any accurate answers, including a order paper question in which I received two of the identical answers to two very separate questions. I have received more than 250,000 emails into my inbox on this issue, and I would like us to have a recorded vote on this motion. Thank you.
Yes.
Could I ask that we suspend the meeting for 5 minutes for us to have a little caucus about this? Because we've seen the motion, obviously, it is appropriately presented today, but we don't necessarily have a position on it right now, and I'd just like to talk to my colleagues for a few minutes before we do that. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, Mr. Bergeron.
Sur la demande de M. Oliphant, je dois dire...
Following Mr. Oliphant's request, I'm a bit concerned because each time that we suspend to allow the Liberals to have their caucus, we generally speaking, when they come back, but usually it becomes quite chaotic. Either we have to adjourn business or we get dilatory motions which have nothing to do with the issue. So I would like to advise, recommend to my Liberal colleagues that I'm not against suspending right now to discuss among ourselves, but once burnt, twice shy. When they come back from their caucus, their huddle, whether it's on the Committee on Canada-Sino Affairs, I'm concerned. I'm a bit worried.
Different when you're a caucus of one, and you can have your own discussion in your head, and when you're a caucus of several, and you respect each other as colleagues. So I think it's a very different position of being in, and I hope we're never a caucus of one, but yeah. So I would like, that I don't think I've ever been denied a request to suspend a meeting for a few minutes.
We
We'll
have your
suspend
report.
for 3 minutes, if that's okay.
I'm not
Mr.
exactly
Oliphant?
sure.
We may take longer than 3 minutes. We'll be back as soon as we can. You can, yeah, that's,
5 minutes, is that good?
we'll try, yes.
Okay. And at this juncture, allow me to thank Senator Beam. Senator, it seems like this is going to drag on a bit longer. Well, yep, meeting stands suspended. So.